Welcome back. This is part 2, Units of History, the Macedonian Silver Shields. I've got the last of my rum and coke, and I have some Chex Mix. So, my nose is just sorry. My nose is itching. Alright, let's see part 2.
Clearly, there are many interpretations to be had here, but it seems scholars do tend to favor the idea that the Argyraspides were an evolution of Alexander's veteran Hypaspists, who upgraded their gear at some point during the Indian campaigns between 327 and 325 BC. Following the eventual conclusion of the expedition, the entire army would return to the west. Alexander and the fleet did so along the Gadrosian Desert, while another contingent marched inland through the Mulla Pass, up to Drangiana and back to Mesopotamia. Scholars reconstructing these events seem to think that the veteran Argyraspides took the northern route with Craterus, while the mention of other Hypaspists with Alexander was some splinter group or newly formed set of units. Whatever the case, the army would eventually regroup after much hardship in Babylon. At this point, they were left to watch as their king increasingly took on Eastern trappings and implemented a series of reforms which left them feeling alienated. This eventually...
The farmer's dog. They make and deliver fresh and healthy human-grade dog.
I don't care about the
right
farmer's
to your
dog.
door. But here's the thing: this isn't your typical
Farmer's dog doesn't care about my dog.
This eventually came to a head in the autumn of 324 BC with the mutiny at Opis. Alexander finally managed to arrange a peaceful settlement, which involved the dismissal of many European forces, including the veteran Argyraspides. These now set off with Craterus on a long journey home. They would be waylaid in Cilicia for a time as the Macedonians sought to settle affairs in the region. But just as they seemed ready to continue, terrible news stopped them in their tracks. Alexander was dead. News shocked the empire and set off a chain reaction of events. In the east, Alexander's generals were mired in heated debate about the future of the empire, while in the west, a coalition of Greek cities rose up in revolt. Craterus was torn on which side of the world to involve himself. Ultimately, his allies would secure his political future in the east, while he set off for the west. He would leave behind the Silver Shields to guard the treasures that had been stockpiled in Cilicia, and later to protect Philotas, who had been assigned as the region's satrap. From this position, they would find themselves caught between the gears of war put in motion by Alexander's ambitious successors. The First War of the Diadochi around 320 BC, for example, saw a coalition of Western forces, namely Antipater, Craterus, Antigonus, and Ptolemy, band together to take on Perdiccas, who acted as an effective regent. In this war, Perdiccas sent Eumenes with an army north to confront the rebels in Anatolia, while he himself led an army to invade Egypt, picking up the Silver Shields along the way. While Eumenes proved victorious.
So basically, everyone was confident in what they were doing so long as they had the Silver Shields with them. Is that pretty much what I'm gaining from all this? Understandable, but...
Perdiccas poorly managed his campaign, which struggled to penetrate the Nile Delta and saw heavy attrition in botched sieges and river crossings. This led his officers to turn on him. A plot was hatched, and at night, a cabal, which included Antigonus, commander of the Silver Shields, murdered Perdiccas. In the aftermath, the murderers would negotiate a peace with Ptolemy, and a new balance of power was agreed upon between the successors of the partition of TRIPARADIS. In these matters, the Silver Shields, and especially their commanders, would be courted by various factions, who saw them as a valuable pawn to control on the chessboard of the empire. However, they were increasingly adopting an independent mind of their own.
As I say, if they just had their leader killed, why would you trust them?
For the time being, they followed their commander Antigonus, who had been made satrap of Susiana and helped him escort the treasures from the old Persian capital back to their previous base in Cilicia. By now, many were in their 50s or 60s, having seen decades of conflict. Perhaps they thought they might finally collect their well-deserved spoils and return home as rich men. However, their dreams of retirement would be cut short with the outbreak of the Second War of the Diadochi in 318 BC. Once again, many factions would attempt to win their support. Ultimately, they backed Eumenes, who acted on behalf of the regent Polyperchon, and who apparently had the backing of the Argead house, with Alexander's own mother writing to argue his case. Thus, the Argyraspides found themselves in the service of another general waging war across the empire. This time, though, they were sure to draw pay from the treasures they had been guarding, and accumulated quite the impressive baggage train of goods and followers, which included their wives and children.
The fact that they haven't stolen from it is impressive.
Eventually, Eumenes would take them east to draw from the recruiting ground of the satrapies of the east, before turning about to face the pursuing forces of Antigonus. The two would fight in 317 BC at the Battle of PARTITION. Here, Antigonus deployed around 30,000 heavy infantry, 6,000 light infantry, 12,000 cavalry, and 65 elephants in an oblique order, with the left anchored on a hill. Eumenes, meanwhile, had fewer heavy troops overall, but with more light infantry and nearly double the elephants. The senior Argyraspides would be deployed on the right wing of the main phalanx, but would relinquish their old position on the extreme right to the younger regiments of...
Just a quick question. The elephant thing still blows my mind. Elephants would be tougher to kill. Yeah. Okay. Elephants would be a lot tougher to kill, even though they're big. It would be tougher to kill them with a bow and arrow than, say, a horse. I have to be thinking correctly on that. Even though there's more mass, they just seem like they'd be thicker. And of course, I mean, it's not the type of bow and arrow that we have today that would definitely do some damage. But, okay, that makes sense. Okay, never mind.
The Hypaspists. It's possible that this role reversal meant taking up the Sarissa rather than the Hoplon, but the evidence for this is not clear. Either way, they would be matched up against the Greek mercenaries who were sure to be quaking in their boots at the sight of the infamous shining silver shields before them. Battle began as one of Antigonus's cavalry officers launched a preemptive charge which was rebuffed and led to the advance of the main body of Eumenes. These troops, and especially the silver shields, proved superior to their counterparts, pushing through the ranks of skirmishers, elephants, and phalangites that got in their way. The impetus of their attack dealt punishing damage that very nearly led to victory. However, their push opened a gap of the left flank, which was exploited by the cavalry of Antigonus that now threatened their rear. This forced them to halt and draw back to protect the baggage train. Thus, while Antigonus suffered roughly 5 times as many casualties, he was able to turn the battle into a tentative draw and mutual retreat. The two rivals would soon clash again at the Battle of Gabiene in 316 BC. Both forces deployed a massive corps of heavy infantry in the center, with additional light troops, cavalry, and elephants. Antigonus chose to refuse the center while concentrating mobile forces on his right to overwhelm the enemy. Eumenes, in response, prepared to parry this thrust. Meanwhile, the senior Argyraspides would be deployed in the center. To this end, we are told that Antigonus, leader of the Silver Shields, sent a rider to berate the Macedonians in the enemy's front lines, saying, "Wicked men, are you sinning against your fathers, who conquered the whole world under Philip and Alexander? Shortly you will see what the Argyraspides can achieve." Apparently, this shook the Antigonid phalanx, while the ranks of Eumenes swelled with pride. Battle trumpets were sounded, and the ranks of both sides clashed. First came a massed skirmisher and elephant duel along the front. Their wheeling bouts churned up massive amounts of dust, which obscured much of the battlefield. This was exploited by Antigonus, who managed to slip his cavalry around the flanks of Eumenes, forcing back his cavalry and capturing his baggage train. However, he could do little to hold back the inexorable tide of the vaunted Silver Shields in the center. These men, most in their 60s and 70s, who were old enough to be grandparents of their foes, reportedly won a great victory, slaying 5,000 of the enemy without a single loss. Yet,
holy shit! A bunch of 60 or 70-year-olds are that good that they didn't even suffer one death, but they killed 5,000. Wow! But it looks like they've lost their baggage train.
stripped of cavalry support, they were left vulnerable. The Antigonid cavalry now collapsed upon them from the rear, but the extreme skill of the Silver Shields meant they were able to redeploy quickly into a box formation and extricate themselves from the situation. As the dust settled, they saw that they were unquestioned masters of the field, but had lost their baggage train with decades' worth of accumulated loot and family to the enemy.
Wow.
Thus, when Eumenes attempted to rally them for renewed battle the next day, they showed uncharacteristic hesitation. They had been hit exactly in their Achilles' heel. What good was any of this fighting if at the end of the day, everything they had battled for might be lost? Many among...
It said they lost the baggage train and family. Did they have members of the family that were taken and like kidnapped?
Among them now sought more assured means to see their valuables returned. Their leader, Antigones, reportedly remained loyal to his master, but other officers and veterans opened secret negotiations with the enemy. The plot eventually led to an agreement that they would capture and hand over Eumenes in exchange for clemency and a return of their families. As the betrayal was carried out, Eumenes lay a curse upon them. "You accursed scoundrels! May the gods who punish perjury take note of your conduct and bring you to the end you yourselves have given your leaders. Yes, it was you who a short time ago bespattered yourselves with the blood of Perdiccas and also devised the same fate for Antipater. You would have killed Alexander himself had heaven willed that he could die at a mortal's hand. You did your worst and bedeviled him with mutinies. Now,
why would you trust them? They've already shown the capability of killing a leader.
Now I am the last victim of your treachery, and I call down on you this infernal curse. May you spend all eternity exiled to this camp, poverty-stricken and homeless, and may you be destroyed by your own weapons, with which you have more often destroyed generals of your own side than those of your enemies." This apocryphal tale would be a harbinger of their eventual fate. In the aftermath of battle, Antigonus would have Eumenes executed and the commander Antigones burned alive for having resisted turning his commander over. As for the veteran Silver Shields, they would be seen as too much of a threat to be kept near the heartland of the empire.
Yeah.
2,000 of them would be distributed among the garrisons, while 1,000 of their surviving members were dispatched to the remote satrapies of the east. According to our sources, instructions were given that they be destroyed by sending them on difficult missions from which they were meant never to return. Such was the terrible fate of one of the most veteran units of antiquity, which had won an almost unbroken string of victories over the course of 4 decades, only to be cast aside, empty-handed, in ignominious exile.
And they did it to themselves. Sorry. They did it to themselves once they took out a leader. Because they showed, right then, when they got away with it, they believed, why not? We control our own destiny. And then they turn into soldiers you can't trust. I think if Alexander the Great had lived, they would have remained loyal. But once he was gone, they became mercenaries in a way, yeah? The loyalty was for sale, but I cannot believe they never touched that, the gold, the cavalry, the gold. You understand what I'm saying? That they never stole from that. Of course, what are you gonna use it? You steal something. What are you using it on? Everyone's gonna know. Oh, he just tried to buy a piece of chewing gum with an entire gold bar. Oh, I wonder where he got it from. Let's go kill Dale. You know? Video. I'm sure it's over, but...
We hope you've appreciated this deep dive into yet another...
I absolutely did appreciate it. It was really good. In the end, though, man, they screwed themselves. And for what? Going home and then spreading the wealth, the gold, amongst themselves. And then they didn't even get it. In the end, they just didn't get it. Whatever happened to that gold anyways? I'm curious. Who got it? Is it in my backyard? Maybe. Alright, well, this is part 2. I'm going to end this here. And like and subscribe, or Alexander the Great will pass away. We don't want that. Have a good day. Have a good